Hey folks, your OS Reviews. You're watching our video first look and a quick review of the Xiaomi Redmi 4X. This is a budget-priced phone at under 120 bucks for the base model that comes with 2 gigabytes of RAM and 16 gigabytes of flash storage, expandable via a micro SD card. There's also upgraded variants with 3 and 4 gigs of RAM respectively if you want to pay a little more. This is an outstanding value for the money if you're looking for a solidly performing mid-end smartphone but don't want to shell out lots of cash. The design is also top-notch and feels like a flagship by any stretch, with aluminum construction and a tempered glass screen on the front. It feels extremely ergonomic in the hand, and hardware specs include a Snapdragon 435 chipset, which is octa-core and clocked at 1.4 GHz. That's a departure from the typical MediaTek chips we see at price points like this, and make the phone perform pretty snappy in the day-to-day use. Xiaomi also has given you all the extras here, including a biometric fingerprint scanner that supports unlocking 360 degrees even when the phone is off, in addition to an IR blaster on the top, which can be used to control television sets, DVD players, home stereo, air conditioners. The list just goes on. And of course, there is a full 3.5mm headphone jack. Other elements of the phone are also quite impressive. If we do a quick size comparison first, we have it next to another 5-inch phone. This is the Ficom Passion 660. From this, we can see that Xiaomi did a great job of minimizing the chin size on the bottom and the top. Because of its rounded corners, the dimensions are actually a little smaller than your average 5-inch phone. Even though the bezels aren't invisible, the ones on the sides are indeed very, very slim. And all in all, it definitely looks like a modern phone that is similar to something like the iPhone 7 or the Google Pixel. Much more expensive options. Taking a closer look at the design next, we have access in the bottom to the traditional home, back, and multitasking drawers. These are capacitive keys, but they are not backlit, so you can see there's no lighting on the bottom. The top features access to a 5-megapixel camera for video chatting and selfies. This is a proximity light sensor that automatically dims the display next to the earpiece. On the bottom, you have access to the speaker and here to the microphone grill, and there's also a micro USB port for charging. The placement of the speaker is pretty good because it isn't on the back, so it's less easy to be covered up, although it isn't a stereo speaker. The side here features access to the SIM card compartment, which is actually a dual SIM tray. So you can actually put in 2 SIM cards. It's a quad-band GSM device that supports 4G LTE bands in select countries, and you can pop in both a micro or a nano SIM. Alternatively, you can swap the nano SIM for a micro SD card to expand on memory. The back features a 13-megapixel camera with autofocus and LED flash, and that's pretty much it. There's a very clean overall aesthetic. All the keys and controls are tactile and responsive and feel machined without being wobbly or moving around. The back here is also made out of machined aluminum and gives the phone a nice amount of weight. There is a champagne gold version of the phone if you don't like the black, which I slightly prefer for its more discreet look. The top and the bottom here are made out of plastic, this little strip, and that's used for the antenna to give you better reception. Its placement is also ergonomic and clever, since when you're gripping the phone, you're not going to be covering these things up, and as a result, it gives you fairly strong reception with AT&T and T-Mobile when I tested it here in the United States. So let's take a closer look at the UI experience next. So like most Xiaomi phones, this runs on MIUI 8.0, which is a pretty heavily skinned version of Android. It's 6.0 out of the box, which is Marshmallow, and that may seem a little bit dated, but it's not bad either, just because Xiaomi is promising an update to Nougat 7.0 very soon, and that will bring it to the latest version of Android, but it's still a pretty heavy customization on top of what we see as stock Android. With that being said, MIUI is fairly elegant, and I like its overall appeal just because it's quite simplistic and easy to navigate around. Your icons are displayed in a way kind of similar to iOS, just because there is no universal drawer of applications on the bottom, and so everything is stacked onto these pages, and essentially have unlimited home screens to populate with your favorite widgets and apps as you download more and more. Of course, there are quite a few customized apps and programs that Xiaomi has installed out of the box, but overall it's not too bad, and most of these apps are actually useful as opposed to being just bloatware. If we take a closer look at some of the essentials first, we have access here to things like your regular Google services, and that includes YouTube, Gmail, Drive, Photos. There's access to a recorder, which you can see has been customized by Xiaomi in its overall design, a calculator, and there's also, kind of interesting, a compass. This is a digital compass. It's actually pretty accurate. And what's interesting about this app in particular is if I tilt it upwards and above 180 degrees, it switches over to the camera and gives you a real view of what's happening around you. This is actually a pretty interesting app that gives you a 3D visualization of space as you're walking around. So all of these things are very cleverly designed and they look beautiful as well from a UI perspective, and a lot of folks will find it useful. There's even a QR scanner, so you don't have to download another app when you want to quickly scan up codes of products to install from the Play Store. Here we do have the full Play Store experience. Since this is the international version of the phone, you can find links down below, as opposed to the China-only version that omits the Google services. Over here, we have access to also Xiaomi's version of a music player that gives you a pretty standard interface, allows you to play back songs in MP3 WMA formats without any problems, create a playlist, and of course view back your cover art. And there's also access to Mi Remote, which is Xiaomi's IR Blaster app, which allows you again to control your television sets very quickly. You do have to be in a direct line of sight with the product you're trying to control, but it's a very cool trick nonetheless. Here we also have access to Xiaomi's Note application. It's very simple but beautiful and straightforward. So if we tap on the recent app that I had here, this is, you can see a typing test that I did, and the keyboard, which pops up on screen, is actually pretty nicely spaced out. There's also, of course, the traditional Google keyboard if you want to opt for that instead, but it has a great predictive text functionality where it automatically corrects your text as you're typing that gives you greater accuracy. As a whole, the display is responsive, fluid, and easy to use and interact with. I had no problems as far as the day-to-day usage, and you can see that in the main operation of the phone, it remains snappy and also quite responsive. Another cool trick is a 3-finger swipe from the top of the screen downwards to capture a quick screenshot, and you can quickly view it back just by tapping on the image that pops up. Other things to note, you can see that even though the phone has a 720p panel as opposed to 1080p, it still offers very generous viewing angles. Colors are bright, they're vibrant, and for the most part, text and images remain crisp and vibrant. There's not that much of an issue as far as viewing back details either, just because Xiaomi does such a great job with contrast and accuracy on their screens, and there is zero gap between the glass and the LCD since everything is tightly laminated just like on very expensive flagship phones. The screen also gets reasonably bright. If we drag down the notification drawer, we can see that it goes all the way up to maximum brightness, which remains decently visible outdoors, although of course the screen is a little bit prone to glaring since it's quite glossy. Otherwise, the screen has a 2.5D curve, and that means the edges slightly slant off at the corners just to make things a bit more ergonomic when you're swiping left and right through multiple pages and screens. One thing I do have to say though is the phone does not have Corning's Gorilla Glass protection, and as a result, it might be a little bit easier to scratch or crack if you drop your phone often. So consider investing in a case if you plan on using this long term. Something also interesting about Xiaomi's phones is it has a theme program where you can easily customize between the look of the overall software. You can download additional themes, which changes the UI as well as the wallpaper, and you can set up different profiles for things like entertainment, for home versus for work, and you can essentially tweak those things for your liking and easily swap between those things. So tapping and holding on a open area of the screen brings up the widgets and wallpapers that I can customize this phone with. This is an area where MIUI, of course, gives you more options than the generic Android smartphone by giving you quite a few beautiful preset wallpapers by default. You can easily select the favorite ones from the panel on the bottom here and download more from Xiaomi's store, or you can even check them out in the Play Store. So quite a few options to make the phone feel more customized. Other noteworthy apps on the phone include WPS Office that allows you to directly view and edit Word doc, Excel, and PowerPoint documents on the go, making this a great productivity tool. And there's also SwiftKey, which is a keyboard that I showed you guys earlier. The drag-down notification drawer can be accessed anywhere on the screen, and you can see that with T-Mobile here in the States, reception is very strong. I consistently got roughly 4 to 5 bars no matter where I was, which is also quite impressive. When it comes to connectivity, again, there is Wi-Fi, GPS, Bluetooth, and there was quite a few extras for enhancing the software and the hardware that you find directly on the phone, just because of how MIUI is a very complete skin on top of Android. So let's take a closer look at some of the essentials next, starting with the camera. The interface here is extremely clean, and again, a little reminiscent of iOS, which really isn't a bad thing at this price point. It's simple to understand. You can simply take a snapshot just by tapping once. It's super quick to focus and capture a shot. And another neat trick is you can use the fingerprint scanner on the back just by tapping on that once instead to take an image instead of using the screen on the front. And that frees up your fingers perhaps if you're taking a selfie with friends and family. Here we can turn on HDR mode, we can turn on flash, we can apply preset filters, which are quite plentiful, and of course go into more advanced settings. You can record video up to full 1080p as well. So taking a quick look at some of the sample images that I took with this phone, you can see that the interface is simple, and I can also share my photos and edit them directly as well. So here's a few close-up shots I took about food, and you can see that the details, all in all, are definitely present, and colors are pretty punchy and accurate looking. It may not be the most vibrant thing in the world, and of course at 13 megapixels, it's also not the sharpest camera compared to flagships that might give you 21 megapixels, or in the Nokia PureView's case, 41 megapixels, but all in all, it's definitely shareable, and in broad daylight, you can see how even zooming in gives you plenty of details and sharpness that allows you to play around with these things, edit them afterwards, and of course share them to social media. So all in all, I'm very impressed with the camera on such a low-cost phone, and I think it does a great job, especially at this price point and compared to other phones in around 120 bucks. So next, let's talk about the call quality a little bit, because regardless of how good a smartphone performs, call quality is still a very essential thing for communication. And luckily, the Redmi 4X handles this basic task very well. Not only is reception great, the microphone here sounds crystal clear, and the earpiece is loud and booming. The microphone mode, which activates the speaker, was also quite impressive sounding. So as a whole, we experienced no drop calls, no problems at all with the calling, and most of our callers even said that we sounded like we were talking on a land phone as opposed to a smartphone, which is again quite impressive. A quick look at the advanced settings, and we see that in terms of memory, roughly 7.5 gigs is taken up by the software. So again, one of the downsides of MIUI is that it does need more space to have all the programs pre-included as part of the package, and that's something to take note of. So you definitely should consider a micro SD card if you plan on installing tons of more apps or taking tons of photos with the camera. You can see that when we open up the multitasking drawer on the side here, that you do have, I would say, roughly a gig of RAM memory available after everything is said and done. So of course, there will be some background computation that uses a little bit of RAM without any open apps. So if we take a closer look at the web browsing experience next, just looking at the browser that Xiaomi has provided very quickly here, it's decent, but I would still prefer using Chrome if you want a slightly more integrated and snappy performance, since Chrome will also integrate with the desktop version on your browser and transfer over all your contacts, your bookmarks, things like that. So it makes for a more complete experience if you're already invested in the desktop version. But nonetheless, the version that Xiaomi has given us gives us quick shortcuts to a lot of sites, and of course we can add more, and we can search something like the New York Times and do a quick test of that. We can take a look at how it renders a more complex page. And all in all, again, you can see that the content loading is fairly swift and responsive over both Wi-Fi and cellular connectivity. Hopping into Chrome and loading the full desktop site, you can see it takes a few seconds to completely render, and all in all, it's still a pretty fast experience, especially on a site like this, which is super complicated and filled with lots of ads, animated elements like videos, slideshows, and only a decently powerful processor and RAM package, I would say, would handle pages like this really well. So the New York Times is a great test for plenty of phones out there, and you can see that the Redmi 4X handles it actually quite well. Obviously, it's not going to be instantaneous in terms of rendering speeds, and sometimes you'll notice a little bit of sluggishness if pages aren't 100% loaded, and of course it depends on how many apps you have in the background in terms of speed, but as a whole, the web browsing experience remains a pretty enjoyable and powerful experience. Other things to quickly know, Xiaomi does give you 5 gigabytes of cloud storage for being a MIUI user. So you can create a Mi account and it syncs up 5 gigs of content, including photos and videos that you take, to the cloud and backs it up so you can also access it on another Xiaomi device. And of course, it saves your content and your memories in case the phone gets stolen or lost. So this is another pretty interesting software element that you get for free. There's also a few security enhancement features that Xiaomi has built right on in that scans your apps for safety, and you can optimize it if you want to, check your data usage, and of course clean up and declutter space as you see fit. And so all in all, the multitasking experience and the overall software experience is pretty good. You can see that you can open and close apps like decks of cards, similar to WebOS back in the day, and it makes for a pretty efficient navigation experience. So that's pretty much the Xiaomi Redmi 4X in a shell. I would say it remains a very good choice if you're on a budget but looking for a solidly performing smartphone that gets the essentials right, from a very good camera to an extremely impressive build to a biometric fingerprint scanner that's fast, lucid, and responsive. Overall, there's no real glaring flaw of the Redmi 4X, and that is its greatest strength. For a phone that's so inexpensive, you'll seldom find something that performs so well across the board, from having great call performance, good speakers, and of course that battery life, which again will get you roughly 3 to 4 days of moderate use before you need to recharge it again, which is virtually unheard of in this day and age where phones tend to die before the day is even over. And that's all thanks to the software optimization and of course to the less powerful internals and display, and of course that massive 4,100 milliamp hours on a relatively small and lightweight frame. So I think Xiaomi has done a great job of actually making things cost effective here, and it feels and performs like a phone much more expensive than it is. Obviously the phone isn't perfect. The RAM on the 2GB version I think is a little low for MIUI, and sometimes you'll notice a bit of sluggishness here and there if you are super demanding, doing a ton of gaming, or have too many apps open in the background. Additionally, the screen is 720p and not 1080p, and of course it's tempered glass as opposed to Gorilla Glass, but those slight cons aside, I think that Xiaomi has done a very impressive job with the Redmi 4X. You can check out more details about this phone in our official written review, but for now this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been a closer look at the impressively low-cost Xiaomi Redmi 4X.